Inexcusable execution by Missouri leads to a consequential loss in Nashville.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and a man still reeling from the John Cena heel turn, as well as, yes, a blown lead by Missouri late in regulation last night. My inner child is going through some stuff this morning, I gotta be honest with you. And we're going to talk about the finish to that ball game, not just whether Missouri should have fouled, should Dennis Gates have taken a timeout. There was a lot more to get to, and really this one probably was going to mess up that magic number, more than likely. I talked earlier in the week about how I thought 4 was the magic number for Missouri, a 4 seed in both tournaments. The SEC tournament, of course, you're looking at a double bye there, and I think once you get into the top 4 seed in March Madness as well, obviously you'd rather, the higher you get, the better, of course. But to me, for Missouri, I think as long as you get past that 5-12 matchup, hey, you're in pretty good shape in March Madness. But after last night, that's looking a lot less likely than it did. And that really hurts to say that because Missouri, well, similar to the Texas A&M game, Missouri with a lead late in that ball game, a minute or less to go in both cases, we got out executed. But to me, this Vanderbilt game feels a lot more inexcusable. It really does, because Anthony Robinson played so well in the second half yesterday, and I've talked a lot about how when he and Trent Pierce in particular, when those guys play well, I would say really even more so Anthony Robinson. When he's playing his best basketball, I think Missouri is such a tough team to beat, and he got a big-time offensive rebound along with a million steals and step-back three-pointers in the second half, but a big-time offensive rebound by Robinson. With about 46 seconds left, 77-73, Missouri was leading. A timeout by the Tigers. You'd think everything would be all organized, but unfortunately, Mark Mitchell steps out of bounds on the sidelines inexplicably. Sort of maybe a forgotten moment there after what all went down, of course, the final possession of regulation defensively and everything else. But that was a terrible error there by Mitchell, unfortunately. Caleb Grill managed to force a jump ball with about 23 seconds left, and there was a phantom foul, I thought, on Jacob Cruz. Now, to be honest, I thought there was a lot of times when Missouri got the advantage of the whistle. But, man, down the stretch there, go back and watch Jacob Cruz get vertical defensively and tell me where he fouled Tyler Nickel to give him 2 free throws there. That was just horrifically bad, I thought. Then made it a 2-point game with 23 seconds left. Ant gets fouled, ends up making them both. But then don't forget, before the last 9 seconds there, Missouri with a 4-point lead, Jason Edwards of Vanderbilt just makes a desperation shot that is well defended by Caleb Grill. He's kind of leaning forward and to the side, almost double pumps it to get up under Caleb Grill. Edwards makes as difficult of a shot as you can possibly make to cut it to 1. Grill gets fouled, makes 2 free throws, and makes it 3 again. So with 9 seconds left, you're thinking, hey, Missouri is in pretty good shape here. Except you didn't have very long to think about it because, surprisingly, with 9 seconds left and 1 timeout in his bag, Dennis Gates did not call timeout. And the obvious question is why? Because what exactly was he saving that final timeout for? Because let's just do some quick math here. With 9 seconds left, Vanderbilt has to throw the ball in on its own baseline, go 94 feet essentially to get a shot off. Then, in theory, okay, Missouri gets a rebound, calls timeout. or I guess a rebound. That's not the point. The point is, okay, let's say Vanderbilt makes a three. Missouri calls timeout then. How much time are you possibly going to have to, then call timeout and draw up an offensive play? None of that logic just adds up. And to be fair, Dennis Gates said after the game, he owned up to it. He said, I should have called a timeout in that spot. Got us set defensively, maybe made a substitution or two as well, but especially just to remind his players, his young players, especially like Trent Pierce, who is just a sophomore, didn't get a ton of experience last season, remind these guys, hey, guys, let them have a layup. Let them shoot a 2-point shot. The only thing that can beat us right now is a 3-pointer. And of course, a lot of you are probably saying right now, why didn't Dennis Gates foul? Hey, I agree with you, especially with 9 seconds left. Hey, if Vanderbilt had a full shot clock, 30 seconds, well, then that's another question. But again, inbounding the ball from their own baseline, a long ways to go. Clock is going to be going. About as soon as the Commodores got at half court, I would have taken a foul there. I think just statistically, it's hard to argue with that strategy. It's not fun basketball. It's not great for the fans who want to see a buzzer beater, but it's smart basketball. And I think it's hard to argue with the percentages there. I really do. I think if Missouri simply takes a foul there at half court, they probably win. But if you're not going to foul there, at the very least, you have to tell your defenders, switch every single screen, because and do not help. Do not help. That's the big thing there. Oh, there was a guy who was streaking into the lane there for a second. Trent Pierce just kind of falls asleep for just a half a beat and leaves Tyler Nickel, Vanderbilt's best 3-point shooter, 41% on the season, leaves him open for a shot that he, of course, knocks down and ties the game. That simply cannot happen. And Missouri, the problem here is, hey, we can argue about whether should Dennis Gates have fouled until the cows come home. But if you're not going to foul, what you can't do is what Missouri did defensively there. Missouri was neither fish nor foul in that particular case. And yes, to all of you pedantic spelling grammar Nazis out there, I know it's FOWL traditionally. This is called a play on words, people. So get off my back for just a second. But the problem is, once again, switch everything, stay attached to every single shooter at the 3-point line. And frankly, if somebody's going to cut back door or drive the lane, just let them stand at the 3-point line. Missouri didn't do either one of those things well, and that's why, to me, that's just inexcusable execution. A timeout certainly would have been helpful there for Missouri to gather itself. Now, one listener on Twitter says, I've lost all hope that this is a good tournament team. Can they play in the spotlight when not at home? No, quite simply is what this user says. Well, I'm not quite that fatalistic, but there is no doubt that there is reason to be a little bit pessimistic about this result. I'm not gonna put lipstick on a pig on this one. That was a real missed opportunity for Missouri. But let's talk about how this changes the outlook for Missouri the rest of the season coming up. But first, I want to tell you about a Fabric, because life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, I'm sure my kids are going to be off to college. So that's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in less than 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. Again, as a parent, I want to make sure my family is financially protected no matter what happens. Fabric gives me that peace of mind. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. So when it comes to the fancy schmancy projection systems like Ken Pomeroy and the like, this game in and of itself is not the end of the world because, well, in the future, if Missouri were to say play, I don't know, take Iowa State or somebody, a similarly ranked team in the future, well, this game isn't going to really change how the projection systems view Missouri. But what it will likely change is who Missouri's opponents are going to be in March Madness. That's the part that stings. And you never know, maybe Missouri will get a good draw in March Madness anyway. You may remember a couple years ago, of course, Missouri got a 7 seed in the tournament. Some people thought that was a little low, but guess what? Round 1, Arizona upset by Princeton, so Missouri actually got a good draw there, at least in theory. Unfortunately, the Tigers were then upset by Princeton in round 2 as well. And that's kind of my point here in bringing that up, is not to pick that scab or anything like that. It's just that this is why it hurts, because Missouri still had a great first season with Dennis Gates, but losing to 15th seeded Princeton in round 2 was simply a huge missed opportunity. That's what it was. It's not as though, well, Dennis Gates can't coach after that game or something like that. It's just, man, if you could have gotten to the Sweet 16 in year 1, that's just one of those things that really does make a difference. As silly as it sounds, hey, the difference is literally one game. Well, sometimes one game can mean a lot more than some of the others. And again, I'm not trying to say that the Vanderbilt game was that important or that consequential as that second round game was a couple years ago. But, you know, again, depending on how the March Madness bracket plays out, we could be looking at this game as a real consequential one here in a couple weeks, especially since I was thinking, hey, you went out 13-5 in the conference is a possibility. That's easily a protected seed in March Madness, I would say. Now 10-8, I hate to say it, is a possibility. So another roadie against a similarly talented Oklahoma Sooners team looking for a resume enhancement of its own. I will say Kentucky, though, the final game for Missouri at Mizzou Arena, not looking like the best version of itself at the moment. Jackson Robinson, one of its best players, out for the season as well. But again, part of the biggest disappointment here, I just didn't really believe that Anthony Robinson could play that well and Missouri would lose this particular game. He was all over the place defensively in the second half. John Sundvold said he is an elite on-ball defender in that game, and based on how he played in that one, it was hard to argue. He was an absolute menace in the second half, really on both ends of the court. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And back to this Twitter user's comment that he's lost all hope and that Missouri can't play with a spotlight. They can't play with a spotlight when they're not at Mizzou Arena. Well, I wouldn't go as far to say that they can't do it, because how did they beat Florida then? That would be my question. A top 5 Florida Gator team in Gainesville. How did they manage to actually win that game if they can't do it? Don't get me wrong, Missouri needs to be a little bit better with some late-game execution stuff. The coach needs to be a little bit better with some of the late-game decision-making, lineup choices, that kind of stuff. But I still believe in this team. I still believe in Dennis Gates to figure out what he needs to do. He's a guy who does learn. He's willing to admit when he's wrong and change, I think, too. So, yes, I'm willing to be forgiving here, despite the fact that, yes, I've got a little bit of a crack in my heart this morning. There is no question about that. By the way, obviously it's not all, hey, well, Missouri was bad and blew it yesterday. Obviously, you got to give Vanderbilt a lot of credit. First half, the Commodores could not buy a three-pointer, and because of that, at least partially because of that, a lot of long rebounds, and Missouri was getting out-hustled for those long rebounds, quite honestly. You can make the long rebound excuse for only so long. At a certain point, you need to play five-man basketball and make sure that your guards are helping to chase down some of those long rebounds as well, because Vanderbilt was getting just simply too many shots at the rim. And yet, a 9-point lead at halftime for Missouri should have been enough to take it home. I will say, though, Vanderbilt was on fire from the outside in the second half. A lot of great shot making from Jason Edwards, as I pointed out, from Tyler Nickel, too. But really, probably the MVP of the game was Chris Magnan, who defensively, again, he was a menace, too. I use that phrase for Anthony Robinson, was certainly appropriate for Chris Magnan as well. And the only thing that was kind of making me laugh during the game, for your Arrested Development fans, for some reason, Manyang was sounding like Anyang. Remember the adopted child of the Bluths that they kept mistakenly calling Anyang? Yes, that was a little stupid joke there for you there. But you know what? Speaking of stupid humor, since we're on it, I did have some fun in this game with my buddy Blake, who I thought had an excellent suggestion for John Sunvold. This is $1 million idea if I've ever heard one. At one point, speaking of Chris Magnan, he said, well, he played at Cornell and he's a smart guy, but that was a dumb play to leave Caleb Grill open. And my buddy Blake said, hey, is that a burn? Well, actually, that's a sunburn, but ching. So if you've ever seen like Seth Meyers, for instance, on his late night show, if you've ever seen those clips of his "You Burnt" segment, that kind of reminded me of that a little bit. I could just see like Andy Samberg or somebody saying, and that's a sunburn, after the Chris Magnan take there. But you know what? Some sunshine as well late in the game. As John Sunvold pointed out, that Anthony Robinson, the winningest player in Florida high school basketball history. Well, that's quite a feather to have in your cap if you're Anthony Robinson. And after this disappointing loss, where does that put Missouri in the standings? Where would they be in terms of Nashville, the SEC tournament? Let's talk about it all in an underrated stretch of the game that may have cost the Tigers just as much right after this. And March basketball is here, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. And with PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win a whole boatload of cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. I love how quickly I can make my picks in fewer than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. So the Tigers were in the driver's seat to get a top 4 double bye in the SEC tournament, but now, as of today, the Tigers alone in 5th place, so they would have to play on Thursday in Nashville. If the season ended today, which of course it doesn't, but just to give you an idea, Missouri would be playing either Georgia or Texas, the winner of that hypothetical ball game, in round 2. So obviously not an easy task there necessarily. Missouri did beat Georgia in Athens, but lost to Texas in Austin. So nothing easy in this league whatsoever. And I will say Missouri got off to a nice start, 18-9, with some early Caleb Grill 3-pointers, but that early lead evaporated with a 10-0 Vanderbilt run and a stretch of questionable shots, I thought, at least to me. And there really is a delicate balance for Missouri, but well, every basketball team, of course, when it comes to shot selection. But I think in particular, Missouri, the way Dennis Gates likes to play, the way he's said in the past that he wants his teams to, quote, lead the nation in 3-point attempts. So I love how Dennis Gates empowers his players and puts confidence in them. So Missouri, for sure, they definitely shouldn't play too carefully. I definitely agree with that notion. And yet I thought they were a little bit too free in that particular stretch of the ball game. Caleb Grill shoots a shot from 5 feet inside of half court. At one point, I thought Cruz may have taken a bit of a quick one. But again, like I say, a delicate balance there. I'm almost, hesitant to even put that out in the universe that, hey, he may have taken that shot a little quickly, because I don't really want the players to even have that thought in the back of their head. Still, when you're watching from television, it's hard not to have your thoughts on, well, didn't love that shot, did kind of love that shot, all that kind of stuff. And defensively, there was a real give and take for Missouri, because you saw some zone defense that was effective at times and ineffective at others. Missouri was playing a 2-3 sort of matchup style zone for most of the game. But then at one point, Missouri went a little 1-3-1 that got Vanderbilt off kilter for a moment. But then in overtime, the Commodores didn't have any problems with anything. To me, the switch to zone, it seemed like, was mostly based off of dribble penetration, because Missouri was having some matchup problems there. There were some, frankly, Trent Pierce, Jacob Cruz at times were getting a little bit picked on defensively, and in order to counteract that, well, I think the Tigers would go to zone defense. The problem is that exacerbated, I thought, Missouri's problems with rebounding, because simply put, I've never seen a team other than maybe Jim Boeheim's Syracuse Orange, who obviously the 2-3 zone, that was their thing for 4 decades. So that's a little bit different. But every other team I've ever seen never rebounds as well out of a zone as they do out of man defense. We can go into all the reasons that that's true, but I thought once again, simply the Tigers were outclassed on the glass, and that only got worse in the zone, in my humble opinion. As you can maybe tell, I'm just not the biggest zone defense fan in general, but I do understand why Missouri did what it did, because even though Trent Pierce, Jacob Cruz, let's say Cruz in particular, you want his offense right now, and he's gotten better defensively, I think, but especially he can hold his own as a bigger guy. But if you're going to get him out on an island against a good dribble penetration type of player, well, that's going to be a challenge for him. At the same time, you want his offense or somebody's offense out there as well against a team like Vanderbilt. So some tough decisions there for Dennis Gates, and some tough trade-offs as per usual. And you know what? Since this has been, not the most favorite show I've ever done, I've tried to keep it a little bit light here at the end. And once again, I did think there was a good quote from John Sunvold. A lot of John Sonny love. Some more sunshine here, as when talking about Josh Gray, John Sunvold said, Josh Gray is about as thick as you can possibly get. And all I have to say to that is, all right, that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Mizzou. I'll see you guys next time right here, YouTube, and wherever you get audio podcasts as well. I'm John Miller. See you on Monday.